So today I just want to talk a little bit about sourdough starter. I thought this might be a good topic to talk about because a lot of stores are not carrying yeast right now, and people want to make bread or different things that require yeast, but they don't have access to it. I know I didn't, so this is why I started this. I did one a few years ago, but I didn't really maintain it. I didn't know how. So I made another one during the quarantine, and I have really enjoyed taking care of it and making things with it. It's been really great. So I've jotted down a few questions that I thought people would have about sourdough starter. I know I've gotten a few questions, so I thought I'd just make a video and talk about it and hopefully answer most of those questions that people had. So basically, what is sourdough starter good for? So sourdough starter is basically you're going to be your leavening in whatever bread item, pastry thing you're going to make. So if you don't have yeast, no problem. You have sourdough starter, and it's really convenient. You don't have to go to the store and get yeast. You have it growing organically in your own home. So it's really cool. What can you make with it? I've made bread, cinnamon rolls, pizza crust, pancakes. You can make rolls, biscuits, donuts, English muffins, crepes, cobblers, chicken pot pie, more. Like, you can make so much with your sourdough starter. It's so incredible. So another question I wrote down is, what do you need to make it? Okay, so basically you only need two ingredients. You need flour and you need water. So the flour, it can be a whole grain wheat flour. It can be unbleached or bleached. Most people recommend unbleached all-purpose, but you can use bleached all-purpose if that's all you can find. That's all I could find, so that's what I used. You can use einkorn flour. You can mix and match. Any flour you have on hand is going to be fine. So you need flour, you need filtered water, you need a glass bowl because a metal bowl will actually react with the beneficial bacteria and the yeast in the starter, so you want to use a glass bowl preferably. I would say if you didn't have a glass bowl, wood or plastic would be okay, but just don't use a metal one. Also need a wooden spoon and like a tea towel. So a towel that you can cover it with, but it's going to still let this starter breathe. That's all you need to make sourdough starter. It's super easy. So the process is basically a 7-day process, or the way I did mine is a 7-day process. So days 1 through 5 are going to be the same pretty much. So you will start on day 1 with a cup of flour and a cup of water. You could technically do like 3/4 cup water, but I just say, just for ease, a cup and a cup. It's gonna be fine that way. So a cup of flour, a cup of water. Stir that vigorously, cover it with the tea towel, set it aside somewhere on your kitchen counter for 24 hours. Okay, day 2, you're going to discard half of the starter and you're gonna feed it a cup of flour and a cup of water. Again, stir it vigorously, cover it with a tea towel, set it aside for 24 hours. So you're gonna do this same process. Discard half, feed it a cup of flour, a cup of water, cover it, set it aside for 24 hours. You're going to do this days 1 through 5. When you get to day 6, it's going to need to be fed more often because you're going to start developing more of a bacteria, and your yeast is going to be forming by then. So you'll have to feed it more often. Okay, you'll probably get this dark, really foul smelling black water liquid resting on top of your starter. That's called hooch, and that just means that your starter is hungry. It needs to be fed more often. So what you're going to do on day 6 and 7 is you're going to feed it not every 24 hours, but you're going to feed it every 12 hours. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to discard half of your starter. You're going to feed it a cup of flour and a cup of water, or a cup of flour and 3/4 cup water, however you want to do it. So that's basically the process. It's really simple to do. So let's talk about discard. So you heard me say you discard half. Why? So why do you discard, and can I do anything with the discard? So first question, you have to discard when you're starting a sourdough starter, because the way sourdough starter works is you have to feed your starter to keep it active and to keep the bacteria alive and growing. You have to feed it an equal ratio to what you have. So here's my sourdough starter. So I really like this jar because I can see, now mine's already mature. When you're starting one, it's not going to be mature. This is Old Faithful now. So I have about 3 cups, give or take, of sourdough starter in here. For me to activate this, basically what I have to do is feed it at least 3 cups of flour and water, because I have 3 cups of starter. I have 3 cups of starter, so I can't just feed it a half a cup of flour. So if you weren't discarding half before you feed it, and you just feed it, basically it's not going to mature right. It's going to overflow. You would have an abundance of starter and not enough flour to feed it, unless you have the capability to, if you have 6 cups of starter, you're going to have to feed it 6 cups of flour. So just long story short, discard half. It is for a reason that you do that. Now, you can do some things with the discard. The first day or two, you're not really going to be able to do anything. Unfortunately, you're going to have to either put it in your compost or pour it in down the drain or in the trash can. But by day 3, you should be able to start using it for something. I use mine to make pancakes, cinnamon rolls. You can use your sourdough discard for anything that doesn't really take a mature starter. Like you can't make bread with your discard until it's matured the 7 days. You're not going to have enough beneficial yeast and bacteria in your starter for it to make bread. How to maintain your starter. Okay, so after you get to the 7-day mark, okay, you have a nice mature starter. You have 2 options, really. You can either keep doing what you're doing, discarding and feeding it every day, leaving it on your counter, but that means you're going to have to use it every day, because as you put in, you have to take out. So you're going to use it every day, sitting at room temperature on your counter. Or if you're only going to ever use it ever so often, which is going to be most of you, that's what I do, you're going to need to store it in a container and keep it in your fridge. Now, when you keep it in your fridge, it's going to slow the bacteria growth. It's not going to stay active like it would if it were sitting on your kitchen counter. So what you do to maintain it, it's really easy. All you do is you feed it every week or 2, and you can store it in the fridge. Now, if you want to make something with it, this is the only thing you have to kind of bear in mind. To make something with your sourdough starter, you need to take it out at least 12 hours before, preferably 24 hours before. So let's say, for example, I want to make sourdough pancakes for breakfast Saturday morning. Friday night, I'm going to take my sourdough starter out of the fridge. I'm going to feed it the right quantity, and then I'm going to leave it on my counter overnight so it activates it again. And then Saturday morning, I can pour out of my sourdough container. It's already active, right, to make my pancakes. And that works with anything, whether you're doing bread or your rolls or your pizza crust. Sourdough pizza crust is amazing. Sourdough cinnamon rolls are amazing. So And any recipes that you want. I mean, you can just look online and you can look up sourdough pizza dough or sourdough cinnamon roll recipe or sourdough biscuits, and you can pretty much find any recipe you need. Sourdough really doesn't have to get complicated. It's really easy to take care of. You just have to make sure that you're feeding it the appropriate amount. So I like to keep on average 2 to 3 cups of sourdough in my jar. This is a large jar, so I don't know if you can get like the size of it, but it's fairly large. I have maybe 2.5 or 2 3/4 cup. So like the other day I made sourdough bread. I took my sourdough starter out and I knew I only needed 100 grams of starter, but I had to feed it. So I took out 1/2 cup and I fed it with 1/2 cup of water and flour. I hope that that makes sense. It doesn't really have to be overly complicated. Basically, think of it as your sourdough is your yeast, and to activate your yeast, it has to be fed and brought to room temperature. Let it sit overnight. The next day you can make anything your heart desires. If you do store your sourdough starter in a jar like this one, just make sure that it is large. It's a large jar, because if this, as it activates, it's like a yeast, it will expand, it will rise up. So you don't want it to explode in your fridge or overflow in your fridge. That's happened to me before. Not exploded, but it definitely overflowed and it just makes a mess. So what you want to do is make sure you have plenty, you can see where my starter dough line is, make sure you have plenty of room in your jar as you feed it and use it and maintain it. Also make sure your lid on your jar is not very tight. You just kind of want to, just enough till it's sealed, but not too tight. So that's kind of how it looks on the inside. You can see the consistency. So you don't want it watery, but you don't want it like thick. So that's pretty much it.